Yo, welcome everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're actually going to cover something a little different. In the last video, I started the Susanna Smith case. But there has been some events that have happened in my personal life that made this particular video very important to me. And I actually came across a different story other than the one you're about to see regarding shaken baby syndrome, or baby shaking syndrome, however you want to call it. So to recap on this, it says the shaken baby syndrome is a serious brain injury resulting from forcefully shaking an infant or toddler. It's also known as abusive head trauma, shaken impact syndrome, afflicted head injury, or whiplash shaken infant syndrome. Shaken baby syndrome destroys a child's brain cells and prevents his or her brain from getting enough oxygen. This form of child abuse can cause permanent brain damage or death. Shaken baby syndrome is preventable. Help is available for parents who are at risk for harming a child. Parents also can educate other caregivers about dangers of shaken baby syndrome. Now, the reason I wanted to cover this is because there's been some personal, trying to think of the best word. There's been some personal events that have encouraged me to dive into this. And I think it's important to understand these situations is because the reason I'm passionate about the videos that I do, it's not just to expose the mothers who are doing bad things to kids. It's to expose the bad things that are happening to kids because CPS is not doing their jobs. And so without further ado, honestly, this is not even the story I wanted to cover, but I think, again, it's important to watch this video and understand the significant consequences that bad parenting has on kids. And in most of my recent videos, it's been about the parents who have killed their kids, or yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that. But in this one, in baby shaking syndrome cases, the kids actually survived the abuse. And so that's why I wanted to cover this, is because in the other videos you saw what the parents did to the kids, and you saw the consequences that came with that, but you have not seen the consequences that resulted with the kid as a result of the abuse. So that's why I wanted to cover this one today, and because it really, if this doesn't drive home the reason why I'm passionate about what I do, I don't know what else will. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, everybody. Welcome to the case of little Bryce, who is a victim of shaking baby syndrome. And honestly, this is not even the story I wanted to cover. I saw one on TikTok that just broke my heart. But it also opened my eyes to situations like this and the effects that it has on the kids. So let's dive into this and let's break it down. This may be a little bit sensitive to some people, as it is a very touchy subject, but at the same time, I think it's important to bring awareness to situations like this, because as it pertains to my channel, my whole point is to try to save these kids, and it's not fair to these kids that CPS gets involved so many times, overlooks all the red flags, and yet the kids suffer the ultimate price. And that's why I do the videos that I do. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do, and that's why I'm trying to bring awareness to these situations. So without further ado, let's get into the case of little Bryce.
Tell me all about Bryce.
So, Bryce was born, he's adopted. He was born a healthy baby boy. And at 3.5 weeks old, he sustained shaken baby syndrome, a case so severe that it caused traumatic brain injury and actually broke several bones in his body.
Alright, so let's just touch base on that real quick. Alright, this kid was born a healthy baby boy at 3 weeks old. And in case you're not aware of what results in baby shaking syndrome, basically it comes from the parents not being able to control their attitudes, and they become overly aggressive with the kids, and it causes baby shaking syndrome. So this kid was born a healthy baby boy at 3 weeks old. And the reason I'm covering this is because this kid in particular, and the one I wanted to cover, and I'm going to still try to find the story on that, but in both of those cases, the kids are very similar to the height, age, and size of my kid. And so it really, honestly, it brought up some tears for me, because this was very emotional to me. That a kid who could have such a promising future have it snatched away because a parent can't control their aggression. And now, this kid, along with other kids who are suffering from baby shaking syndrome, also have to suffer with the brain damage and any other results that came from that. So they were off to a good start. Now they're basically behind brain-wise because of the traumatic experiences that has happened to them. And mind you, in all of the cases resulting in baby shaking syndrome, it is one or the other parent, or both, or a step parent. But in all of these cases, it's a loved one, it's a guardian who has done this to the kids.
So he was on life support for 2 months when we were in the process of becoming foster parents, going through the training and process of getting licensed.
Just a note real quick right there, like, I have watched some stories of some kids who have suffered this type of trauma. This is the first case I've ever come across where the kid was actually put on life support because of the effects that trauma had on the kid. So keep that in mind as we're going through this story. And mind you, this could have been, like, this was a healthy baby boy. And at least in my son's case, he's 4 now. And so he's developed and he's smart and everything like that. But these cases right here kind of make me think of him. Like, imagine having a kid who is very smart. He's he's very adaptive. He can pick up on things very quickly, and then have all of that snatched away due to baby shaking syndrome, because one or both parents could not control their aggression. And now this kid has to grow up with a mental disability that's going to affect his life from here on out.
The day we went to sign our license, our caseworker brought a referral across the desk. Since they're kind of written in code and abbreviations, she just wanted us to be familiar with some of the lingo and abbreviations and said this child's taken care of. And it was actually Bryce's referral, and reading through the thing, it was pretty traumatic to read the description of harm that had been done.
And again, these are the foster parents. These are the parents who are trying to adopt the kid. And you heard what he said. Like, we read through the transcripts. We see what was done to this poor kid. And even he said it was just horrible. Horrible things that happened to this kid. They did nothing wrong other than being born into a family that couldn't control their aggressions. And now this kid has to go through the rest of his life with this mental disability, this brain damage caused by his biological parents. This, I honestly, I could not imagine reading the things that kid been through. The way he described it, I could not imagine reading that and not breaking down.
My wife, being the emotional, compassionate woman that she is,
fell apart.
Fell apart.
Without getting into too many details.
And I'll be honest with you, I would too. The story I mentioned that I couldn't find actually made me fall apart. It literally brought me to tears, because the kid was the same size and the same age as my kid, as is this kid. And so I can't imagine all the progress that he's made being snatched away because somebody couldn't control their aggression. Like, I could not imagine that. And if you're a parent, I'm sure you can't imagine that either. I'm sure if this doesn't break your heart as a parent, I don't know what to tell you, because this, and this is why I mentioned in the beginning of this video, is that some of the things you're going to hear may be heartbreaking, and it will be. But it's important to go along with what this channel has represented. And this channel has represented protecting the kids. And in this case, you actually get to see a kid who survived the abuse. And that's why I'm covering this one today. Because this kid survived the abuse, but he will never be the same. Ever.
Details. How would you describe what was in that report?
It was graphic. It was graphic. The first thought that came to my mind was, what monsters could do this to a 3-week-old baby boy? There's more to that story as it's developed, but it was the most graphic descriptions I've ever, had to read on paper regarding injuries to a child, and such a small child at that.
How old?
And imagine being that person. Imagine having to read what this kid went through. And the way, I have not even seen the description of what they're referring to. But I can only imagine the horrors that was in that description that made them think, oh my God, this poor kid. And that's what it's all about. That's what my channel is designed for. is to protect kids from suffering from injuries like this. Like, we have got to do a better job to prevent situations like this from happening. This is why I'm so passionate about what I do. It's got nothing to do with our legal system. It's about the effects that it has on the kids. And when you read what this kid went through, all the injuries this kid suffered, the brain damage, the bone fractures, the bone breaks, that's got to be horrific for a kid who is 3 weeks old up until, what did they say, 5 years old? From 3 weeks old to 5 years old. That's horrific. That's a long time to suffer that type of abuse.
What is Bryce today?
Bryce is 5.5.
What's the most important thing you want others to know about Bryce?
But he has a huge heart and he loves to make people smile.
Wow!
You don't want to sit anymore?
Look it.
Does he move around a lot?
Yeah, he likes being up.
Take it. Look it.
Oh, look at.
Hey, thanks for saying hi. Yeah! You're amazing.
And honestly, it seems like the kid is doing fine, and it does seem like he's happy with the family he's with. But you can't watch this video and not see that this kid has got some type of brain injury. And that's the upsetting part. Is because, and this is what provoked me to do this video, is because, as I said, I saw a different story earlier, and I'm going to try to find that one, because I really do want to cover that one, because it's what made me want to do this in the first place, because it made me think of my kid. Because my kid is autistic, but he's very smart, and he's come a long way from where he's been. And it only takes something like this to set a kid back from those progressions. And this is why I wanted to cover this video today, is because it just takes something like this to knock a kid off of his game. He could have been a rock star. He could have been shooting for the stars. And now that's snatched away because somebody else had an anger problem that they couldn't control. And instead of dealing with it, they took it out on the kid. And now the kid is going to suffer for the rest of his life. That's what made me want to do this video. That's because I thought of my kid in this own scenario, of how I would feel if my kid was in this scenario, because he's close to it. And that's all I'm going to say on that. But it's important that we recognize the dangers that surround the kids, so that we as a society can do a better job at making sure this stuff doesn't happen. This kid may grow up to be a happy, successful kid, but I promise you, he is not going to be as successful as he would have been if he wouldn't have suffered from this traumatic experience.
Amazing, Bryce. Again? That's again, right?
Yeah, he can play for you forever.
Again!
And you can see how spaced out this kid is. And it's nothing bad about the kid. I'm not speaking bad about the kid at all. I really am not. So if that's what you take away from this video, you got the wrong message. That's not what this video is about. Now, this video is about showing the effects that neglect and abuse has on the kid who survives the abuse. This kid did survive. And based on the video and the family that he's with, I believe he's going to do great. I believe he's going to be in a happy, loving home, and he's going to do great. But what he's been through has messed him up. And that in itself can never be changed. And this is why I say, and this is why I'm passionate about what I do, this is why I say CPS needs to do a better job. Because there are so many instances where they are involved and they say, we didn't see anything. And the next thing you know, the kids are suffering traumatic experiences because everything was overlooked. That's what I build my channel on. And again, it's not to make mothers look bad.
Go Bryce!
I'm sorry. Alright, I'm sorry. But it's not to make mothers look bad. And it's not necessarily to make CPS look bad. But it is to bring awareness to the fact that not all mothers are good mothers. And it is to bring awareness to the fact that CPS needs to step up and do a better job. Because when you don't, this is what happens. Again, I'm very convinced that this kid is going to grow up in a loving, happy home with people that love him. But he has suffered a great deal amount of trauma because the people that should have done something didn't.
You're amazing. You're really good. Yeah! Go Bryce! You're a rock star. Thank you for telling me when to clap. How does he communicate?
So he communicates multiple ways. He has, I'd say, about 5 to 10 verbal words, as well as another probably 10, 15 sign language commands.
Friend? Oh, thank you for signing friend. Zach, tell me about Bryce.
So we've had Bryce since I was around 10 years old.
What was it like to get another brother when you were 10 years old?
At first I wasn't really too excited, just because I was the youngest, so it was like a change in the household. But the more I got to know him, the more he just kind of grew to be a part of the family, and I didn't really see him as a kid that was adopted. He was more like my brother that I've had for a while now.
What have you learned about shaken baby syndrome since becoming Bryce's parents?
That it happens a lot more frequently than anyone can imagine. In fact, once more education came out about shaken baby syndrome, you think it would prevent more of that from happening. It actually has increased over the years. So much.
That's actually a statement I agree with. And again, this is why I'm passionate about what I do. Is because you would think that the more information that comes out about situations like this and horrible things that happen to kids, you would think that our society and our judicial system would be more aware of these things and be more preventative to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again. But they're not. As you heard this lady say, it's more frequent than you think. And I know that a lot of the topics that I cover on this channel are very sensitive, but it's important to admit that these things happen. And the reason I bring them up, and I've said it before, is because the longer you pretend this doesn't happen, the more kids who are going to suffer. And you look at this kid and you tell me that's fair to him.
Much so that Children's Hospital has had to open up a complete wing just for shaken baby victims.
What did you think when you learned about his story and background?
Just think about that just real quick, and I just want to touch on that real quick. Hospitals have dealt with baby shaking syndrome so many times that they've opened up their own wing in the hospital to treat kids who are suffering from that. Which means there are a lot of parents who are being very aggressive toward their towards their kids. I'm sorry. But is that not a problem? Does nobody see a problem with that? That baby shaking syndrome is so common that the hospital actually had to open up their own wing specifically for kids suffering from that syndrome. Is that really not a problem? And again, this is why I'm passionate about what I do, is because we need a wake-up call. And we need to stop letting kids like this suffer. We need to do better.